in Texas, I think we run things better because the politicians are never in session, which is the way the United States used to be. We used to meet, I think it was once every year in the summer or once every other year, and they put it in Washington because they knew nobody would want to go to that swamp, mosquito-infested nightmare of a town. And unfortunately, the politicians and everybody, I guess, decided to make that a permanent thing. But it used to be that they would only come in. That's the best scenario for a republic because it allows people to have control of their own lives. The House and the Senate in Texas, they don't rule our lives because they're never there. So they ended their session in an interesting way, wouldn't you say, Stu?
I would say, and it's apparently, as I believe it was the New York Times in a news story, by the way, wrote and summarized, these are the Republican efforts to clamp down on voting.
Oh, man.
See,
Thank goodness we have that happening.
It's very, as you can see, anti-democracy, Glenn. Republicans don't want people to vote. They're looking for a select, group of 6 or 7 people who will vote each year.
Right.
They're trying to clamp down.
I'm on that list. I don't know about you, but I'm on that list. And
they're all white men.
And what I say goes. Right. All white men. And there's about 6 of us, maybe 7. 8 if you count our Zionist master over in Israel.
Of course. This is the new Georgia law controversy is now Texas, because as each state has gone through it, the national media has tried to come together to tell everyone how terrible these things are. And now the latest one is in Texas. Texas took a while to get it done, came down to the end of the session, which needed to be Sunday night. Long story short, what the Democrats decided to do, because, they love democracy so much, Glenn, and the respect of
democracy.
The intent of the voters must be respected.
Yes,
of course, as you know.
Amen.
So what they decided to do with these elected officials that were put in by voters, they decided instead of letting them, accomplish their jobs and actually do their jobs and get the bill that the Republican voters all supported, get that through. They decided to walk out and make it impossible to come up with a quorum, basically a procedural measure, so the vote couldn't go through.
So, all in the name of democracy.
Of democracy, yes.
So they stop the democratic process.
Now, as you know,
or
Glenn,
Republican process, if you will, not Republican with a capital R, but a Republican with a small r.
Right.
They stop the Republican process, which part of that is democracy of all of them lining up and voting. They stopped that all in the name of that.
Yeah, really interesting, especially after being lectured for the past couple of weeks of the terror of January 6th and the insurrection attempt that we saw on that date, Glenn. The reason was that it was so offensive was not just the violence and the rioting. It was because they stopped the democratic process from going forward. That was such a terrible tragedy just a couple weeks ago. Now it's to be praised that Democrats walked out of the session so they couldn't get the vote done. Now, long term, they will have a special session and they will get the Voting Rights Act done here in Texas. But what's fascinating about this, Glenn, is not only that they're stopping democracy to preserve democracy, as it were, to paraphrase an old George Bush line on capitalism.
I gotta violate the free market to save the free market.
Exactly.
That doesn't really work, George.
So that's what they're doing here. But in addition to this, it's a typical bill that you've seen from Republicans this cycle, which is basically, hey, we think maybe you should be able to prove who you are before you vote. Things like the overwhelming, one of the most popular items in our national discourse, which is voter ID. things that are, this is approved by 70 and 80% of minority voters, 70 and 80% of Democratic voters approve of voter ID, but it's tossed out there as if it's the most offensive thing you've ever heard in your life. So it's mostly stuff like that. The one, just like in Georgia where they latched onto, you can't have water when you're in the lines. There's no water. Well, people only go to vote to get water, and now you're taking away the water because water is the reason why people get in line to vote every November. Water.
And really, it's so hot. It's so hot in the summer in November. That November heat wave in the summer. Ooh, it's so hot.
People are dropping dead in the lines in November from heat because they don't have any water. We have to bring them water. That's what they did in Georgia. So they didn't attempt that thing in Texas. What they're doing in Texas is the
brisket.
No, there's no brisket. Where's the brisket?
I need brisket. I can't go on. First I voted in Georgia and I didn't get any water. Now what? No brisket.
So what they're trying to do in Texas is they're highlighting this one part of the law that was also part of the original take on the Georgia law. Basically, it says, yes, you can vote early. Yes, you can vote early on weekends. Yes, you can vote early on Sundays, but you can't vote Sunday morning early. You can't vote until I think it's 1 p.m. on Sunday.
Whoa.
Now,
Whoa, my gosh, look at the oppression.
Right. That's what they're saying. Now, why are they saying that? I mean, the Republicans are saying, look, we want to be able to protect people who work at the polls and have their ability to still go to church. So we don't want people forced to avoid church to have to go work at the polls because they have to open the polls early.
Just so you know, Texas is the closest to a blue law state that I've ever seen. And it's all by choice. People do go to church. I know it's weird, Democrats, but people do go to church, when you're not putting their pastors in jail in Texas. And very few stores are open on Sunday. A lot of people take, the Sabbath actually as an important thing.
And it's not against the law for them. I mean, there's some places do close. There's a lot of places open too, but they're not as heavily trafficked as you might think because people are actually at church. It's a high population religious voting base and citizenship. But the Democrats are saying, well, the only reason they're doing this is because they're trying to limit the souls for the polls, Glenn. Souls for the polls.
Souls? Hang on just a second, my friend. Hey, Sarah, do we have the gospel music here as we talk about the souls for the polls? That is fantastic. So are they actually being honest this time? Well, souls for the polls, that's dead people voting?
No. I should say, you're right, souls to the polls. So you're right. So I guess it's not, we don't want our voter registry, we want dead people. It's their claim is basically is a big...
I mean, they took the mask off already. I thought maybe they're just also like, yep, we're just whipping up names of dead people. It's the souls for the polls.
Would not be surprised, honestly, at this point on this one.
No, I wouldn't either.
So Souls to the Polls is a program that runs, largely in black churches, which is an idea that after church, everyone gets together and they all go to the polls to vote early, I guess. Now, I don't know what time church runs. It runs various times. Usually there's multiple services in Texas, I've noticed.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of churches have show times.
Yeah, there's like three or four
in the movie theater.
Yeah, 3 or 4 services per day, right? Because there's so many people that actually go to church here. But the idea being that, what they're accusing Republicans of is altering the time schedule so that no one can vote before 1 p.m. But because they think they're trying to limit the amount of people who will go from church directly to the polls. Now, in theory, I don't know, what time does your church end? 11 or 12? So you'd have to wait an hour. Of course, the whole point of this is to make the poll workers who are also going to church, giving them time to get to the polls to open. But what they're saying is they're just trying to limit black people because they apparently, and again, this is racism, Again, racism in action here by Democrats, who are basically trying to make the case that black people care so little about government and society that if given an opportunity to vote, but they need to wait an hour, will not vote. Because they care so little about this country, they care so little about the state, that they will not wait for an hour after church to go vote because they actually care about the poll workers also being able to go to church. These religious people want to thwart the poll workers' ability to go to church so that they can go immediately after, apparently is the accusation here. And they're trying to say this is the only reason they're doing this is to limit black voting, and therefore this is anti-democracy, which is why we can walk out on the democratic process at the last minute.
Okay. Oh, my head hurts from trying to do the gymnastics on this one. Weren't the Democrats the ones that were trying to shut down all of the churches?
Thank you.
Wasn't it isn't it the Democrats that are the Marxists that are not really for church, or God?
Here is a group of people, Glenn, that have spent the last year telling you you're not allowed to go to church at all. You are going to be fined. Your pastor is going to be arrested if you try to go to a worship service. But they're the ones telling you that democracy is at its edge if black churches aren't allowed to cart their voters directly to the polls from church. Again, in addition to all of this, we spent the last how long with the Democrats telling us it's against the law for any pastor to say anything positive about a Republican policy from the pulpit because it's a violation of the separation of church and state, and they're going to get their tax exemption status removed. But yet, Souls for the Polls is so vital to democracy that apparently now you're allowed to go to church just so you can get to the polls. It's insanity.
I love this. Souls for the polls. I mean, it just couldn't be any more clear. You're saying to me, you're going to lose your tax status if you intermingle at all church and the polls. You're going to lose your tax status. With an exception of Souls for the Polls and Alaska and Hawaii. What is that? This is a scream. If it wasn't so tragic, if it wasn't our country burning down, it would be hysterical.
Yeah, and
if I were in Canada, no, because everybody's going to be ruled by the Chinese soon. So I wouldn't be laughing if I was in another country. If I were in China, I'd be laughing. Ooh, hang on. Shh. I can hear them laughing right now. That's an amazing thing.